Hello, everybody. Welcome to CripChat, your weekly podcast for everything disability. Today, I have with me Jonathan Shar, Ibby D,
Hello.
myself, David D, and also Sarah Stiles. Today, we're going to be talking about emergency ready for someone with disability and why it's important. Over to you, Ibby. How are we today?
Thank you, David. Welcome, everyone. Yeah, I'm doing good, David. Thank you for asking. How's everyone else doing today?
I'm good, thank God.
I'm good. Awesome. And how are we today, Sarah?
Oh, yeah. um, I've been all right. Just my
Oh,
body, the normal stuff.
nah, it's all good. Look after yourself, Sarah. Anyway, welcome, Sarah. Sarah, why is emergency preparedness a crucial topic for people with disability?
Well, it's not something I really thought about myself until QDN came on board, Queensland Disability Network. Started questioning it. They partnered up with University in Sydney. It's really interesting because other countries have got a national emergency plan for disabled people, but Australia does not. The last time I heard, Australia does not. So the work that QDN has done with the University in Sydney, sorry, I forget which one, was really crucial because we don't have a national plan. It's not thought about. They were doing going to every city and doing a special one in every city with disabled people invited to come along, because every city has its own needs. Every city is a bit different and township is different to each other. But they do have a book, which is a really, really good idea to get, because when I went through that book, it made me think of things that I've never, ever thought of before. I'm lucky and I'm not in a flood zone or anything, and I'm not really that heavily impacted by emergencies, natural disasters. Definitely not in a big way, but it definitely made me think of things that I did need to think about. And then with Alfred this year, I was reading certain things that were happening, even in Ipswich, where I am, where we were not in a direct line of fire. Obviously, we still had a bit of flooding. We lost a lot of power. And so there were people that were impacted in a dramatic way despite planning. And I think that that is why it's so important, because we've got a lot more to plan than everyone else. We have to rely on other people, whereas other people don't have to do that. For a lot of us, we have to rely on other people in a really important way. For some, it can be life or death, literally. And we can plan the best of our ability, but still some things can happen. It puts you in a bit of a troubled spot.
Yeah, look, my
Well,
heart goes out to, those in Queensland at this point in time, especially. If you're watching from Queensland, take care of yourself, take care of your family, always reach out, It's important to support one another. Thank you very much for that, Sarah. Now, Sarah, how have recent natural disasters in Australia impacted people with disabilities differently?
It's a good question. And I think that there'd be a lot of answers that need to be brought up that I'm not aware of. But I was reading about some instances that happened recently in southeast Queensland, and some of them were a bit distressing, specifically related to disabled people. So while nobody wants to be without power for a long time, if you rely on electricity to keep you breathing, for instance, things like dialysis that you're doing at home every night, there's a number of different things that people with chronic illness or disability require, need power for. It goes beyond cooking or whatever. That's one of the really big things that always comes up in every disaster. It came up yet again in this most recent one. And also what I noticed was a friend of mine had bought, she shared on Facebook, she bought a power pack to be prepared for power loss, and it was actually too strong for her power needs, for her disabilities power needs. and it actually blew her house. You know what I'm trying to say. Um, you know what I'm trying to say, don't
Well,
you? So
the
then she
fuse.
still ended up, yeah. So she still ended up with, no power, and even though she, had bought this power pack. So that's what I was saying before. There's all these variables, and you don't always think of them all. You can't think of them all. So power causes a lot of issues. There was a situation where a young woman, this mother, had a heart attack recently. So even though her house was set up for the daughter who needed power 24/7, they moved in with her son temporarily because she'd had a heart attack, and so she needed some care as well as the daughter. Her son was providing that. So even though they had called Energex and they had done everything they needed to do, the hospital had said there is no way they're taking the daughter if they lose power. And I just thought, hang on, wait, what? The hospital said they're going to keep the beds empty for all of the accidents. And that opens up a whole other topic, to be honest with you. It makes me glad that people are being fined for driving through floodwaters when they know better, keeping these beds open for accidents when probably a lot of those were avoidable. Meanwhile, this young woman really, if they lost power, needed to be in hospital, and the hospital's refusing her. There's a lot to unpack just there, I think. Apart from power, there's all the issues of the multitude of disabilities that can affect simple bodily functions, swallowing, and all kinds of other things that you cannot now adequately maintain in your home, and you definitely can't maintain it in an emergency centre.
Thank you for sharing it, Sarah. It's important that people are aware of this as well. So, Sarah, what are the biggest accessibility barriers people with disability face in natural disasters?
I'm looking forward to people actually sharing things. I hope people do share things, because obviously I'm limited, in answering this question. But emergency roads and exits are a big thing that I haven't brought up yet, and any place to go to for emergencies. That can be a pretty big one, actually. Medication, all kinds of things. It's tricky. I was reading through, so RACQ, I have my power wheelchair insured with RACQ, and they sent out a package to me on how to prepare for emergency, so an emergency plan. One thing I absolutely loved about that was they have a section for pets, and also a section for checking on your neighbours. And in that section, they do mention people with disabilities. Is there a neighbour or somebody with disability? So they do actually bring that up in there. And then they said, after you've checked on all of these people, then leave. I thought, well, that was really interesting. But the plan itself that they send out is obviously not for people with disabilities. I love the fact that they've told people to check on your disabled neighbour, but then they don't have a pack for people with disabilities. Just, food for thought.
There are people with disabilities. Everyone's different. For every person with disability, every different person with disability has a different need. So it's a bit
Yeah.
hard to adapt one thing for everyone.
That's why it's really important what QDN have done. Their booklet is pretty big, and it goes through everything and things you wouldn't even think of. Now, if you have that personal plan done up, it helps you understand what you need to do for yourself with your particular disability and needs, and then you can action that with the council, hospitals, family, support workers, well in advance. It's just brilliant because it covers all the things you would never think of. You can then share that with the council or whatever, whoever you need to share that with. There's a whole section in there, I'm pretty sure, for support workers, because as I stated earlier, some people are very reliant on a support worker. They cannot physically get up and prepare their home and yard themselves for strong winds or whatever. One of the things I know in the RACQ plan was to put poisons up as high as they can go. I'm assuming, so that they don't get into floodwaters and things like that. But how many disabled people can do that? Without help. And so this is why what QDN and this Sydney University have done together is so, so important. The Ipswich City Council are on board with this. They are aware of this initiative. So it is definitely something you can take to the council and say, hey, I know you're aware of this. I've done my book. This is my plan. And these are the elements that you as a council need to be aware of. It'd be interesting to take it to your all the councils. Like, how many councils? My council is on board, but how many councils around Australia are aware of this? This is a Queensland thing. This booklet needs to be shared around the country. I don't know how far it's been shared in New South Wales because it was a Sydney University they partnered with, but this is a resource that is available online for everybody to access.
They probably have put it online so people can access it themselves.
Yes, but please take it to your councils. If you don't know if your council is aware of this or not, then please download it, print it out, fill it out with a support worker or family member. It takes a bit of thought. It takes a bit of time. Allow some time to fill it out and then contact your council. Make an appointment with them. Meet with them in person. I much prefer to meet with my council in person. I don't like the phone. It's not as personal that way. And then, even give them a copy or give them the link and say, this is absolutely necessary. And Australia is behind the times in not having this as a national disaster plan for people with disability.
Thank you, Sarah, for highlighting that, the importance of checking in with your neighbours. I think that's very important. It's also important to check in and see how everyone's doing during a disaster.
This booklet that you're talking about has got to be in different languages too. Not everyone speaks English or reads English.
Correct. This is where, I preferred to fill it out with my support worker. So this is where you would hopefully have somebody in your circles who would be able to support you with something like that.
For sure. Utilize your support workers. Thank you very much, Sarah. Next question. Evacuation routes and shelters designed to be fully accessible for people with disabilities challenges.
Now, I'd like to make a point about this. Obviously, as David said earlier, there are many different disabilities. There are obviously going to be some certain things that a disability shelter cannot accommodate. You can make them accessible, be able to get in with a wheelchair or mobility device. They may even have a disabled toilet. I know here in Ipswich we use our showgrounds, so there's going to have that there. But in regards to some other things, they definitely won't have them. Now, this is where the discussion has turned to disabled people turning to hospitals, turning to places like hospitals, nursing homes, and other places like that where they can provide something more in depth. But like we found out, this year with Alfred, the hospital was not willing to take these people, our hospital. So that's now, okay, well, this is the advice that's always been given, go to hospitals, etc., if you've got more in-depth needs. Okay, well, what do you do if they don't take you? That's now my question.
But isn't it, their job to take, and care for the needs of people with complex issues?
Well, yeah, you would think, but if they want to keep all of their beds for people who have accidents, and not take somebody on who desperately needs them in a time of emergency. Like I said, some people that, I remember the last floods we had, somebody was worried because they rely on power to breathe. So I'm like, and this is where the conversation started. Surely a hospital would take that person on, but if you need something like dialysis every night, that's also a big concern, and they're not taking them on, then we have a big problem.
That would be a big problem. That would be a big, huge problem. So would they at least direct you to where to go?
I have a feeling that this family didn't need to go down that route, thankfully, but it does actually bring up the conversation. I think that there's already enough extra problems. The people who do stupid things put their lives at risk, and, first responders' lives at risk. All these people should be fined because what if the hospitals, I'd love to know the statistics. What percentage of people who have accidents comes from something that could have been avoided?
Sometimes it's bad decisions that they make or lack of knowledge.
Yep, and I'm not including those people. I'm only talking about the people who deliberately put themselves in harm's way. Like that video from the floods in 2022 of a man in a four-wheel drive. This wasn't just the width of one street, okay? This was like almost like a whole block kind of space of flood water that would become a raging river, and he decides he's going to drive through it, and he and his girlfriend, or whoever she was, she's saying we're drifting, blah, blah, blah. And, they then were stranded. I'm assuming they climbed into a tree. He quickly grabbed the video cam, the car camera off of his car, which had caught the whole thing, and then they evacuated the vehicle that was now being washed down a raging river, which was a street. And I'm assuming they've climbed into a tree because that's all there was available. So I'm talking about those people. He should not have gone through those floodwaters, same as the woman in Brisbane who got fined for doing this. It's about bloody time that these people were fined. It's those people I'm referring to.
Are they going to still rescue them?
Well, yes, obviously they're human beings. We don't want them to die. I'm just saying that I'm glad, that they've started finding this time, because it is actually a huge problem, and these people are being selfish and thoughtless, and they're not thinking about their life or the people's lives that they're putting at risk alongside themselves. So the reason I guess I bring this up is because of the comment that, a family was given where the hospital said, no, we're not going to have your daughter because we want to keep the beds free for all those who get accidents. A lot of those are genuine things that can't be avoided, no fault of the person, but there are way too many it is a person's fault. And we need to see those diminished.
Good point. Thank you, Sarah. So, Sarah, how effective are Australia's emergency alert systems in providing information in accessible formats?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this, and I'm not sure that I'm aware of all of the formats. Obviously, they had Auslan interpreters on TV, but what do you do if you've got no power to power your TV? What do you do if you don't have power for days and your phone goes dead? Oh, and they weren't as effective as they needed to be with the Auslan interpreters either. I was using the interpreter, and every single time while the reporter was talking, they then changed from the view of the reporter and the interpreter, and they started showing footage of people preparing for Alfred or people dealing with stuff. Well, as soon as you change screens, how the hell are you supposed to see the interpreter now? Because the interpreter is in the studio with the reporter, and now you've just changed from, to footage of people preparing. Well, somebody must have complained, because the last couple of days they stopped doing that, and the interpreter was in a little corner of the TV permanently after that. So somebody must have complained, and then I felt bad that I didn't send an email and inform them. There was another complaint about interpreters that I saw the deaf community mention, and I cannot think of what it is, but which is annoying me, because I did see another complaint. But that's what I'm familiar with. But I don't know any other emergency notifications and alarms and things. I know they kept saying, listen to your radios. Well, deaf people can't listen to a radio. Also, what radios are they talking about? I don't know. radios are on our phones and TVs these days. So do they have radios specifically for emergencies that you can go get, or?
Well said, Sarah. I think it needs to be clear as to how we can access information.
Exactly. It's not clear enough. I think that they need to give a report specifically to this, to people who need that extra detail and extra information, because we don't have that. And deaf people can't hear a bloody radio.
Exactly. Good point. Well said. So, Sarah, what challenges do people who rely on medications, mobility aids, or support workers face during disasters?
This brings up an interesting story that happened with me and my support worker. Just
Yeah.
last week. I think that there needs to be more people in general need to be educated more on things like flash flooding. So I know that I've gone out and said, you know, people ought to know not to drive through floodwaters by now, which is true. But I still think that there needs to be some more education about flash flooding and that kind of thing. People are at work. They're not sitting at home watching a report all day. My support worker actually had never heard of flash flooding before. He'd never experienced flash flooding. I had warned him, knowing that all the floodwaters would rise on the Sunday. I had warned him that it might not be a good idea for him to come to me on the Monday, which I had already prepared myself for, not having a support worker, knowing that the flood was coming. He decided to come anyway. He'd already been out first thing that morning, and he doesn't live too far away from me at all, to be honest. He'd already been out first thing that morning, like really early. Then he went home to get ready to do a shift with me and decided to come. And he came across some flash flooding. He sent me a photo. He said, "This was not here half an hour ago." I explained to him that that's what flash flooding is. He said, "But it's not raining." I'm like, yes, that's what flash flooding is. There are amount of people that had no idea what flash flooding is that has come out, you know, the past couple of weeks. I was a bit surprised how many people didn't understand what it was. So I think that along with emergency plan books to help us come up with a plan for ourselves as individuals, there probably should be some information in those books about things like flash flooding, I think. I know people were asking in advance what pharmacies home deliver medications, and tried to set that up for themselves if they couldn't leave their homes, and setting that up in advance before all of this happened. I know that I did send my support worker out to get medication for me right at the beginning before there was a problem. Yeah, with mobility aids and things like that, I know that I had a conundrum myself. My power wheelchair is not supposed to be in my house for reasons, and it is stored in a garage outside. But the problem with that is during weather, like what we would expect from a cyclone or any strong storm, the water runs through there. And so, you know, there are all these different things depending on the natural disaster. I think that it changes, doesn't it? Like what you do with wheelchairs, mobility aids, how you use them, support workers, medication. I think that depending on the disaster, it might change those things a little bit. I now keep all of my scripts for my medications in my handbag, and I have a little first aid kit for things that I might need. So in my handbag. So I actually have these things ready 24/7, no matter where I
Well,
am,
then you
because
can.
I need
Well,
that even
well,
outside of a disaster.
Yep.
well. Then you can say you're very prepared,
Yes,
and
yes,
and
there's
so
been
should
enough
everyone else be.
instances. Well, like I said, like when you have a chronic illness or a disability, you need to be really well prepared for little things that the average person doesn't have to think about, like eating and breathing and stuff, all of the time, even without a disaster.
Now, well said, sir. It's important that you do be prepared, especially when it comes to disasters. Now, good that you are there. Thank you very much for sharing, Sarah. So, how do communication barriers, such as a lack of sign language interpreters in emergency broadcasts, impact the safety of people with disabilities?
Well, this is where electricity is really, really important. And being on the cooling interjects, setting up and generators and things, we rely on electricity to be able to video chat and to be able to connect with each other. So I noticed that, like, the deaf community were constantly sharing information, and they weren't the only groups on Facebook groups, so that people were well informed. People who didn't have access to these things themselves are now being well informed in the Facebook groups. So what do you do if you don't have access to these groups? Very good question. I know for me personally, my plan was to just charge my phone and my power wheelchair if I lost power. Some people without power for a week. Even your battery packs that have 5 chargers in them, I guess you'd have to have one of those per person. They're expensive. One thing I notice is people don't know how expensive it is to be disabled. It's very, very expensive to be disabled. Non-disabled people are always shocked when they find that out, and that is not even including medication. And this is where we have to be prepared well in advance, especially as a disabled community, because it's going to take time to save up for everything that you're going to need, especially if you've got more than one person in your home. So battery chat packs for your phone, I know I've got one that has 5 chargers in it. So you might get by on that for 1 week.
People with visually impaired need audio.
That's exactly right. Do you have a radio, David, so you can hear the updates?
My TV tells me everything, visual and audio, so I just take the audio from that.
What if you lose power and your TV doesn't work?
My phone.
And so do you have a battery pack to charge your phone?
I do have a battery pack.
Sweet.
I've got a few,
Yeah.
but they need to be charged.
This is what I mean. Like, you've got to keep them constantly charged and ready. Like,
Yeah.
I find that in my everyday life anyway, even without a natural disaster, it's best to have them charged and ready, because we get thrown a lot of surprises.
Exactly. No. Well said. Well said. Thank you very much, David. Thank you very much, Sarah. So, Sarah, what was it like for people with disabilities who experienced natural disasters in Australia firsthand?
That is a good question. I don't know anybody with a disability who has experienced a natural disaster firsthand, because, like I said, where I am, I'm normally pretty good. All of the things I was seeing spoken about on Facebook this year was all about preparedness and trying to get information. Those were the difficulties, especially when people panic buy. We are already limited in what we can eat and drink, a lot of us, and then they panic buy, and then we miss out. And unfortunately, some of the things that, with some of us, if you miss out on food or the limited food or drink you can have, it's not a matter of just feeling hungry for a day. It's a matter of getting quite sick and ending up in a bad way. So there's so much to unpack with just that. And I did notice those issues. But as for somebody disabled who's actually lived through a disaster, if anybody would be willing to share those stories without it setting off PTSD or any trauma, I definitely would be interested in speaking with them and hearing those stories. I am actually currently producing a show. One section of it is all about floods, and I would really love to represent the disabled community, the actual truth, the lived truth in that. So please, anybody reach out. That would be amazing. But unfortunately, I can only use my imagination to answer this question.
Thank you very much. So, yeah, like I said, if anyone has any information they'd like to share, please reach out to Sarah. So, Sarah, what support systems help them stay safe and why improvements could have made a difference.
Yeah, I guess everybody might have a different answer to this. Having access to your support worker, family member, friend, somebody who knows you. I think you can only really be safe if you've got support from somebody who truly knows you already. There's a lot of variables that we just don't need if you're trying to work with somebody who doesn't know you, which is another reason to have that plan, that book from QDN filled out well in advance. Support systems. Yeah, that brings us back to, does Energex know of your needs? Do enough people in the disabled community know about what's on offer? I find that a lot of disabled people actually don't know to set it up in time.
A lot of them are left in the dark.
Yes, exactly. I was most of my life. I didn't even know I could get help or I could get a wheelchair for my specific disability. I didn't know that. Like, I didn't know anything most of my life. I have supports now in my 40s. And I was born with my disability. So I think that's an important thing that needs to be thought about.
So
What was
education.
it?
That's the main thing. We need education for what we
I
can
think
do
so.
and how we can be supported. And what, because a lot of things, if you haven't met other people with the same disability, you don't know what you can do.
Yeah.
Now, that's a very good point. It's all about access to information and being educated about what supports there are out there. So people like
What
Shar don't feel left out.
what we need to do is get people meeting each other, knowing each other.
Yes.
They can get help. What
Yes.
Yes.
can be
That's
helped?
what we need. An Australian-wide network.
Introducing each other to what types of help they get. If you do sports activities, people with the same disability, then you learn things from others. Also, the parents learn from other parents. Support teams learn from other support teams what things work or what things don't work and where to get things from.
That's a good point, David. And also substitutes. People have had a disability for a lot longer than some others. What kind of things can you get from Bunnings, for instance, as a substitute? If required, things like that. There are some things that you can use parts from Bunnings to create a little system or something, for certain needs. So, yeah, we do. We need that network where we're all sharing.
Yeah, I totally agree with both of you, How important is, getting support from your peers. So peer support is what it's all about, sharing knowledge, information with each other. So a very good point highlighted. Thank you both for pointing that out. Sarah, in regard to the next question, why emergency preparedness policies exist in Australia for people with disabilities?
Good question. I am actually not too sure. From what I can tell, Australia actually doesn't have one. It depends on individual councils or, I mean, there's been some talk, some research between QDN and, Sydney University, as I stated, but from what I can tell, Australia doesn't have one. If we do have one now, please let us know, somebody. But from what I can tell, Australia still doesn't. And other countries have there's been a comment made publicly about this. I forget what it's called. There's an anagram for when disabled community has a specific emergency plan set up, but other countries are doing it. So come on, Australia.
We have to look into it, but it's
We've
a
got
good
to
thing
look
you
into
put
it
that up.
exactly.
Now, it's a good one you pointed out, so if anyone knows of any policies that are out there, let us know. So, sir, state and local governments doing enough to ensure inclusive emergency planning.
No. No, they're not.
Straight to the one. Yeah, more work needs to be done. And so, how can disability organizations and community groups play a role in improving emergency preparedness?
I think by talking about it, having it in the discussion at least.
I can't speak for around anywhere else in Australia. Obviously, QDN and Queensland is doing a really good job. I keep seeing them getting the information out there. I've seen them do that a lot. So they need to just keep doing that because they've already come up with an amazing program, that book. As for community groups definitely can play a much bigger role in improving emergency preparedness. I'm just trying to think of what they currently do, like what kind of community groups are out there, what they currently do. Apart from your average ones that are trying to supply food and clothing and, basic necessities for people who lose them during a natural disaster. I think that maybe what they could do better would be making sure that communities get more information, maybe better information. I was reading that here in my city, the police were knocking doors in the air zones that would be affected. So there was that, but they wouldn't know in advance if somebody was disabled. I think maybe it would be a really good idea if there was actually a list. If councils or community groups that did support people during disasters had access to a list.
I have an idea. You know how you've got signs on the house for stranger danger? What if you've got
Yeah.
signs that says someone's got a disability here?
I think that'd be great. Like if you could put that out. I don't know if I'd want that on my house permanently, but yes, if I had an option of being able to put that out as required, knowing that police or first responders were going to be knocking doors or something like that, or to inform neighbours or anything, that actually, yeah, I think there would be a lot of people who might do that. But see, if our councils had a list of the disabled people, not just Energex, if our councils had that list, right, then whatever generators, whatever power packs, whatever that they could oversee and make sure that those who truly need them get them first. Then we're not going to have people worried about, desperately needing hospital because the hospital's refusing them from the get-go. Or I think really what all this boils down to is more networking and people speaking up because, like I said, I didn't even think to contact the TV stations and inform them of what was happening. You can't just, if you show that footage, the interpreter's not available. Why did I not think? I think that a lot of us grew up in an era where you were shut up. And we're just so used to that I didn't even think to contact them. And the psychological things also need to be, thought about here. Because that's a psychological component, isn't it? Clearly someone did contact them and I'm like, thank you so much. But yeah, I mean, I guess in all of the talks that I've had with people over the years in physical preparedness, we haven't discussed any psychological preparedness.
But I think it's all about this really awareness. And just look, like David mentioned before about peer support, people coming together, making sure that everyone is checked in, safe, and if they need support, reach out to them.
Could there be emergency centres specifically for disabled people? Could every council find a building that does have a hoist and things like that so that disabled people have a different emergency centre to everyone else?
Well, that's a leeway into our next question, Sarah. So, Sarah, what role does technology play in making emergency communication and response more accessible?
Yeah, I was just, because listening to some things that David was saying and that, I'm thinking, wait, hang on, why can't we have two different centres? And then anyone who's a support worker, whether they have a client there or not, anyone who's a support worker could then go to the disability emergency centre and not the other one.
I'm thinking if you get, you've got different support centers and they've got different clients and different support companies.
Yep.
they can all sort of register to one area and then tell them, look, we've got these are our clients and these are what the needs are. If there is an emergency, this is what we need.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or get like a set of different departments.
Yeah.
One focuses on like disability, one focuses on like aging. It's yeah, food for thought. I mean, something to think about. But some good points I mentioned, Sarah and David. We'll go to the next question. What steps can people with disability take to create a personal emergency plan?
Well, we will share the link, everybody, so that you can print out the book that QDN and Sydney University have done up, and then please share that with your family and support workers. Sit down with them, coordinators, whoever you have in your team. Go grab someone who knows you and can sit down and fill that book out with you, because you will want someone with you to fill that out. It's a
Can
big
you
book,
fill it up
but it's so
online?
worth it.
Can you fill it up online?
I have no idea because I was given a manual book, but that is a good question.
Yeah, it's something we'll look at, we'll suss out. But yeah, thank you very much for that. We'll send the information through once we receive it. Awesome. Sarah, what essential items should be included in an emergency kit for people with disabilities?
Anything that's going to help your body function adequately enough to not put you in hospital, I guess would be my first response. So for somebody with dysphagia, that might be their thickener. So a lot of us can't, necessarily just drink water from a tap. Or there's all these things that people wouldn't, get really shocked about. What? You can't drink water? It's tricky because we often only get access to a certain amount of medication or a certain amount of these things at any given time. And to have some of it in stock, to put aside for emergencies, and then that goes out of date, you kind of need to be, rotating. But sometimes it's tricky getting enough of these items in order to store in case of an emergency. That's one thing that I've come across. How do you get enough, especially if you've got government subsidy, how do you get enough of these things? Because they only give you a certain amount at a time. So how do you get enough of them to store for an emergency? That's been my question for a while.
You have enough to put on the side, and then every time you get new ones, you replace them with the ones that you can put aside and use the ones that
Yeah.
you put aside.
I think like
That
certain
way
things like with hearing
they
aid
don't get
batteries,
out of
just
date.
say, yeah, I need more when you don't, and then don't put those extra ones aside. But I'm just wondering
Yeah.
if there are certain things that disabled people need that they only get enough of for their immediate needs because it is allocated portions, and so that has been something that I've wondered for a while.
So to think about. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So how can individuals register for priority assistance from emergency services?
Good question. I know that there was a form, like with energy, with my power company, for instance, they have a form to fill out. But I'm assuming you could either contact them online or just give them a call. Email. So I guess you could do either. I know people like organizations like Energex are on Messenger as well. So I think it looks like there should be enough variety of ways to suit every disability. I'm hoping. I know the deaf community still have an issue where they're forced to actually speak to somebody on the phone, at times. And like, it doesn't matter how many times I say I'm deaf. Like, this is the only way I will accept something. You've got to talk to us or whatever. But I would say that with Energex and these emergency places, I've noticed they've got a multitude of ways. I spoke with Energex through Messenger during Alfred, but you'd be able to phone, text, email, whatever.
Thank you for that, Sarah. So, Sarah, how can neighbours, disability organisations, and local councils work together to ensure no one is left behind during a disaster?
Again, I think that these networks and having those lists. What if they do and we just don't know about it? You know what I mean? Like that's also a possibility, isn't it?
Then it's got to be taught.
Yes, I just think that it's like so support worker agencies, support coordinators, anybody that's working with you. But I think that if it's a business organisation, these people ought to be given this information straight up, so that they can empower their clients and their workers. When it comes to individuals
What
and
about?
families who,
I'm thinking. I'm thinking. What about if there's a registration of people with disabilities? That way, they've got something to have a checklist
yeah, see, this is the
of
thing.
who's
There needs to be
disabled,
checklists,
who needs
but
help.
why can't a checklist then be put on Facebook? Like if there was a national checklist, right, for disabled people, and then every council had that, and then they are putting that on Facebook, they are putting that on posters, they're putting that wherever they can. So I think that agencies and councils, if they had this checklist, even hospitals, like they all need a national checklist.
Yeah, but some people worry about privacy too. That's the thing.
Yeah.
You're gonna help people, and there's some people are gonna not want to be known. You can't have best of both worlds.
Yeah. I see your point. Something to think about. What policy changes are needed to improve emergency responses for people with disability?
Again, I know that in the past with QDN, we have discussed the fact that there are some people who cannot leave their homes, and there are deaf people, blind people, and that are being left out. Deaf people cannot hear anything. If they don't have power, they can't see interpreters. But people who cannot leave their homes on their own either. I know that we have discussed this before. So I think we were discussing again a list, like a network, a list that councils and certain agencies and groups of people have, so that these people are most at risk can be contacted in person.
No, thank you for that, sir. So, sir, how can listeners advocate for more inclusive emergency planning in their communities?
Look, just speak up, go to your councils, go to whatever agencies you work with, tell your family, tell your friends. You could even type something up, pop it in your neighbours' mailboxes. Like it's just all about communication, isn't it?
It sure is. It sure is. And what are some ways to raise awareness about the importance of disability inclusive disaster prepared?
My brain always goes to creative things because I think that's what gets people's attention. So I would want to get creative, grab some music, do a little comedy skit, something like that, including real life scenarios that people just would not think of because it's not part of their life.
I'd like to thank you very much, for being involved on CripChat, sharing your knowledge on emergency preparedness. And look, feel free whenever you, want to jump back on CripChat, you're more than welcome to join us. Once again, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a discussion that needs to keep happening. So I hope that a lot of people, watch this and start the conversations wherever they are.
Thank you, Sarah. For everyone out there,
Okay.
you've been watching CripChat, you're working focus on everything disability. Goodbye for now.
Bye. Please
Bye.
like and share.